Hello, welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be doing my 14.8 Midlane Tierlist. So if you're content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There were a lot of changes this patch. It was the MSI patch, and they wanted to try and elevate some of the champions which weren't seeing a huge amount of play to kind of be picked up a bit more, and then nerfed down some of the overperformance. Azir, of course, is in this space. He was kind of like the highest prior mid at the moment, and they wanted to knock him down. Successfully, they have. And let's cover the changes. So once again, this is targeted towards mid elo. That is where my tier lists are targeted towards now. And yeah, let's begin with the D tier. So Smolder is going to kick us off. He is basically gone from the mid lane at this point. Over the patches since his release, he has been dropping in play rate, and now he kind of sits at the bottom of like what is an acceptable mid laner play rate. Next tier list, I'll probably end up removing him as this is a continuous curve downwards, but he's not performing well here, so it's not really much to lose. He is a D tier champion. Alongside him, we now have Azir. Azir got nerfed pretty heavily this patch. His W lost scaling 8 damage on it. His passive or his health regen went down from 8 to 5 to now 3.5 on this patch, and that has really made him quite punishable during laning phase. All these changes has just kind of put him down a lot, makes him nowhere near as safe as like this hyper carry mid lane option. He is already very elite pro skewed, and yeah, all these changes have hurt him a lot in low elo or like mid to low elo as well, and he is not a recommendable champ. Don't play Azir at the moment. He is now not performing well enough to recommend. Moving on to the C tier, we have Corki. Corki is very close to the D tier. He's been underperforming for a long time. He's only ever really seen play in pro as like an answer to the Azir when he is like kind of weak to like average. When he's strong, he sees a bit more play, but in his current state, he's very weak. Azir has now completely dropped off as well. Corki getting very close to the D tier, not a recommendable champion at the moment, and yeah, sits at the bottom of the C tier. He's not even particularly hard to play, which is why he is suffering so much. Moving on, so in the C tier we also have LeBlanc. LeBlanc went from the bottom of the C tier to the top of the C tier with her buffs this patch. They definitely did help her. 3 seconds early on the W is a very elite skewed buff, however, which does definitely like tailor her more towards like Masters Plus. The Q gaining 5 flat damage, of course, is a point and click ability. That does help her within just generalistic play. Not enough to push her into the B tier, but no longer completely terrible and like unrecommendable. She does have merit, especially if you do put a lot of games into this champion. She's just not quite there at the moment. Orianna, still going to be within the C tier. She's still very much underperforming in average to low play, but still a very elite skewed champion. Has like the movement speed on the W, which once again, elite skewed lever. The pick just in general tends to be a bit elite skewed as well. But yeah, not performing very well in mid to low elo at the moment. Not very recommendable, especially not the hardest champion to play compared to some of the other picks. Ziggs is going to wrap up the C tier. He's still underperforming at the moment. As you know, I'm going to add a new champion to the C tier. There is another underperformer, but yeah, Ziggs underperforming for a while. Definitely better in the bot lane. That is where I'd very much recommend playing this champion. I'm adding Zoe here. So Zoe has been underperforming for a while. Doesn't do very well in mid to low elo. Definitely more of an elite skewed pick. With Lich Bane getting nerfed a couple of times, she now is not very recommendable. Yeah, falls within the C tier at the moment. Moving on to the B tier. So these picks are performing a bit better. Definitely have a bit more of a merit or like niche builds, which can like allow them to function quite nicely with against some of the more stronger options at the moment. So Vel'Koz, Shrodia Vel'Koz is definitely an option, which I've seen people kind of like choose between, like if you want to go down more damage, whether you want a bit more util. Chevaliers is a very nice option on like on the likes of Galio. Veigar is another one who can use this item quite well. And yeah, Vel'Koz, you can go some like tankier builds and like just use the value of his base damage. You can also go down like heavy AP routes if you want to try and snowball throughout the game, try and 1v9. There are options there. Of course, he is still very much punishable. If you don't get ahead, he can feel very hard to play. And yeah, he sits at the bottom of the B tier, but still a better artillery option than Ziggs at the moment, just because of his flexibility, if anything. Moving on, so Victor also going to be here. Victor's been underperforming for a while. Ever since his like prominence during Arcane, he just hasn't really found his footing again. He was definitely better during the Lich Bane being like really overpowered. Of course, that's been brought back down again. Victor not performing very well at the moment, sits within the B tier. Karma got nerfed really hard a couple patches ago, got 2 E-buffs, I believe, since then. Still just hasn't really found her footing again in the mid lane, but definitely better in mid than top. She can still utilize her E more effectively here, like rotating onto Void Grubs, rotating onto Dragon Fights, stuff like that. but still just underperforming at the moment. You have to be consistently landing your empowered Qs to really get a lot of value out of this pick. And if you're not able to consistently do it, either because the champion's got a lot of mobility, or you're not great at landing skill shots, then don't play this champion. She is so reliant on it. To like rotate her cooldowns. Malzahar gonna be in the beta. He's getting buffed in 14.9, but for the moment he is still very much underperforming. He just hasn't really found a spot with like the mythic item removal. The new Leandries just doesn't feel as good on him. Of course, he really valued the Lost Chapter start, which is why it was so good on him. But yeah, this season just not finding that same success. Sits in the B tier. Malphite, of course, a great counter pick option. Lol Dolby has made a video on AP Malphite, and if you like follow that, then yeah, you can find a lot of success on the champion. But a lot of people do play AP Malphite incorrectly, or they don't pick him in the right spots. But as like a counter pick, and if you itemize him correctly, he can be very oppressive, quite strong. Point and click damage on Q can be very obnoxious. His ultimate is a very valuable team fighting tool. There's lots of merits to this pick. He's probably close to the A tier at this point, but yeah, gonna sit in the B tier for the moment. Definitely build him correctly, follow the guides, and yeah, you should find some success on the pick. Carly, gonna stay within the B tier. She got buffed this patch. 30 base health did a lot in elite play for her. Not so much in average play. You're not gonna get punished as hard. You tend to be able to maintain that health pool. Of course, it does still help her. She rises up a bit within the B tier, but not enough to go from like mid to low to high to like jumping into A tier. Now sits at the top of B tier. Syndra, definitely underperforming at the moment compared to last season. Of course, she got nerfed right at the end of last season, and that definitely didn't help her going into this season. She got like a 10% AP reduction on Q. This season, not really found a spot as well with the items, has kind of dropped out of competitive play. Wouldn't surprise me if they do buff her up at some point, but for the moment, she's more of a B tier option. Xerath also not finding as much success on the new item system. He was performing quite well towards the end of last season, but very skill shot reliant. Of course, if you can consistently hit your Qs, your Ws against the target, then he can be quite valuable within the matchup, but against high mobility mid laners, and with just the overall movement speed increase within the game this season, he's not finding that kind of value. And yeah, he sits within the B tier. Zed, of course, Zed is going to also be in the B tier. He is finding a bit more success on some of the lethality options. If you build him correctly and you kind of like find what build works for you or what works within the game, then there can be merit to picking this champion, but he is very hard to play. Being able to like utilize his strengths in his like wave clear, wave clear slash like harass from long range with WEQ. You can be quite oppressive within that nature. He used to be really strong and Ravenous because that just completely took all the skill out of laning phase with Zed. This season he's a bit weaker as he requires more skill to play. But yeah, for the moment he's going to sit within the B tier. Probably a low B tier pick. I wouldn't recommend playing Zed unless you put a lot of time into this champion. Hui ended up only getting a 5% AP ratio buff on the passive this patch. He was going to gain a buff towards the QQ as well, like a 5% AP ratio on that, but they ended up pulling it as he was already close to seeing play with he was already seeing professional play, so he didn't want to do it, like go overboard and have Hui as being like one of the highest prio picks. Of course, now this means he's not going to jump up into the A tier. I imagine even with the QQ buff, he probably wouldn't, but he would sit like right at the top of the B tier. Now he sits kind of like middle of the pack. Still a solid option, but yeah, you want to put the games into him, learn his rotations, like get familiar with the 9 abilities, and yeah, you can find some strengths of this champion. He's not a solo carry. You do want to have like other people around, like surrounding factors, which can like really help you. But yeah, he's still a solid option. Yasuo, definitely the harder of the two Wind brothers, and a bit weaker at the moment, if anything. Yasuo's more early game skewed, which tends to be which is a very elite skewed lever. It does mean he's a bit better in high elo, doesn't tend to perform as well within mid to low, unlike Yone, who is definitely better within the scaling aspects. But once again, both the champions, Yone and Yasuo, do struggle with their itemization. They tend to spike really nicely on the 3 items, and then struggle with 4-5. With Death Dance being buffed next patch, we could definitely see a shift in that, and definitely these two champions being a bit better. But for the moment, Yasuo's going to sit within the B tier, Yone a bit higher up. I'll talk about him in a minute, though. Lissandra also going to be within the B tier. She's still doing alright. Not really quite as oppressive as last season, when you could do some like unique solo carry builds. Like you could really heavily scale like spike with like magic pen and then just alt QW targets, and if you had enough AP you could just one shot people and snowball through that. This season doesn't have the same success with like the itemization. She's still not doing too badly and can still work as an answer. Relatively safe pick, but you do kind of want to stay within like the tempo of the game. If you fall behind, it's very hard to play this champion. Her tools just become a bit too hard to pull off, as she's very much reliant on being in your face to kind of like enable her R, enable her W, stuff like this. And yeah, for the moment she sits within the B tier. Be nice to see some list buffs, but she's doing all right. Jace, but it's relatively decent in both top and mid. You can function with him in both. Of course, very elite Scooch champion. He is a very oppressive if you play him correctly. The QE has so much range. If you're playing him like within a harass comp where your EQs just perma-linger on the enemy, they can't really sustain through it, then there is lots of value to this pick. I wouldn't recommend blinding him, as things like Malphite are great answers to him. Malphite, once again, can be flexed within 2 roles. So, yeah, that is something you do have to be aware of. I wouldn't recommend playing Jason unless you want to put a lot of games into him, but he's definitely not in the worst spot he's been in. And yeah, there are definitely strengths to this pick. Kiana, also going to move in the beta. Kiana's still performing decently, but like she is always going to be elite skewed. This is just how the champion functions. Her mobility, her invis, her just overall way of playing laning phase, where you have to be very, very skill. I don't want to use skillful as a word, but like you have to understand the functionality of like maintaining HP, not getting over harassed, your all-in combos, stuff like this, which can be quite challenging. And for the most part, she's in a fine spot, but not as high as she would be as like in an elite tier list. Talon, also going to move in the beta. He's a bit easier to play, and he finds both success within mid lane and jungle. Once again, his like main kind of power is his ability to shove and then roam into sides and use that. Of course, you want to be getting the right thresholds on the minions. Sometimes you do want minion DMAT in that space. If you're going things like Tiamat, you can maybe sometimes skip it. If you are going like more just heavy lethality routes, you might have to take it. If you're running like First Strike, then it is something which you can really value, unless you're going down like Biscuits, stuff like that. But yeah, making sure you're just able to get pressure on both sides, invade enemy jungle, but it's kind of your strengths within the game. He's relatively strong across the board in terms of like the time. He does struggle later on though, if like enemy has heavy peel for marksman, as that tends to be who you are picking. But yeah, for those part, sort of B tier option. Cho'Gath, this is tank Cho'Gath. AP Cho'Gath is dead. Wait, where is Cho'Gath? I don't have Cho'Gath on this list. I think I removed Cho'Gath. Yeah, I'm gonna leave Cho'Gath actually out of it. No one really plays Cho'Gath mid. I kind of added him when he got buffed a couple patches ago. But yeah, and of course the play rate once again just drops so quickly. AP Cho'Gath isn't viable at the moment, and for that, I'm going to leave him out of the tier list. And then Ryze. Ryze actually performing quite well at the moment. I'd really recommend playing this champion. If you put the games in, you understand the combos, the power of like EQ and EW in the right situations. Using W just as a slow to like follow up with the rest of your combo is really valuable now. But 50% slow from 35%, which is what it used to be. Definitely has a lot of value. On top of this, his W cooldown is also lower early on to the game, which tends to be his last max, so that also has a lot of power within the game. And yeah, Ryze definitely performing a lot better, has strong itemizations, the Roa, the Seraph, stuff like that he really values. Don't go Malignance, which is what I saw someone do. Your ultimate doesn't do anything with this, like I guess you get the haste, but yeah, you don't get any damage from the procs. Make sure you're going like, yeah, the Archangels, the Roa, stuff like this. You spike really hard off these items. And yeah, there's lots of merit to playing this champion at the moment. Moving on to the A tier. Vladimir, once again, is kind of close to dropping down to the B tier, but isn't just weak enough to like really kind of like make that push down, but like still not performing great within the A tier. He's definitely struggling. The itemization just isn't as great for him at the moment. He's still quite, I mean, like he's still really valuable on like Liandry Rift and Rabadon. These are like his 3 core items, and then you can go things like Crypt Bloom, and yeah, there's definitely strengths to playing this champion at the moment. But overall, he's not performing amazingly. Just find the right spots to play him, and yeah, you should have a successful time, but don't blind him. He is pretty punishable with some of the answers within the meta. Vex, also just a counter pick. Don't play Vex as a blind. You want to play this champion to high mobility like high mobility picks, where you can make use of your passive a lot. Your itemization isn't too bad at the moment. You can spike really nicely on Storm Surge. It's like a second item option. You do really want that. Like, you have to snowball throughout the game. If this pick falls behind, she really struggles. Like, her damage just isn't really there. But yeah, solid A tier pick, great counter pick. Just not really able to push higher as she's reliant on that counter pick factor. Fizz really was one of the best champions at the beginning of the season. He's still fine at the moment. Of course, Lichbane and Storm Surge are his two best options, or like two best items. You really need these, and then you can go into things like Shadow Flame, Rabadon, Cutbloom, Zonya. Yeah, you can like go different routes, but yeah, Fizz still performing quite well. Really good answer into a lot of champions. Once again, I'd recommend this pick as a counter pick, not as a blind option. Things like Acel, he is a great pick. That is where a lot of his win rate comes from, actually, at the moment, like being a really good answer into Acel. But yeah, solid A tier pick at the moment. Yone performing a bit better than his brother. Definitely has value in the fact that he has great scaling. Bit safer as well, can do a bit more damage from a bit more range. His W also a very valuable shield, spikes really nicely on 3 items, and yeah, a great A tier pick. Aurelia is really nice on Bork. You can't really go any other options at the moment. Like the old Wit's End was a bit better as like a first item option in like AP matchups. This season you just can't do that. Losing the AD on that item really hurt it. It's still a solid second option into like heavy CC and AP heavy comps, but like Sundered Sky, also great item at the moment, so I'd recommend going Bork, Sundered Sky. It's a bit safer as well, and then you can go like Sterix as a third option, but Aurelia, still a solid mid lane and a top lane flex pick, and yeah, great if you land the champion. I wouldn't recommend just early like first timing it. You have to put the games in, put like 20-30 games into this pick, and then yeah, you should be good to go. Yeah, lots of merit to this champion. Lux is actually pretty close to the S tier these days. She got buffed early on into the season, and then she got buffed more recently. Her passive and her Q, I believe, both received a 5% AP ratio bump, and it's definitely put her in a very solid spot. Malignance is great on this champion that can just perma rotate R's. She has great wave clear. Her abilities are relatively hard to miss, especially with a mid to low elo. Like you can consistently just full rotate combos on cooldown and not really have to worry about being direct with them. Like the E has a solid AoE, the Q has a relatively generous hitbox. Once again, the R, you do tend to just follow up with the slows on the Q, and her wave clear, stuff like that. Gives her a lot of merit, and yeah, in a really solid spot at the moment. Twisted Fate, also still a decent A tier option, of course. Did have his time in the spotlight back when both AD and AP Twisted Fate were in a great position. Nowadays, AP is just a fine option. You don't really see AD Twisted Fate mid, but yeah, you're looking at things like the Lichbane, Roa, Shrevelia are solid options. RFC is great with the crit scalings across the board now on this champion, and yeah, he's finding a relatively his time in mid relatively fine at the moment. Pantheon, his simplicity is kind of what gives him a lot of merit, like a simplistic early game skewed champion. You don't really have a huge amount of these, as they tend to be very elite skewed and then get nerfed down intentionally because of this. He does tend to be a bit more punishable than a lot of these options, and of course you can go like the Bruiser or the Lethality options. He doesn't spike quite as hard as last season, where he was a bit better just all the way through. He's still a bit more early game skewed this season, but yeah, still a solid pick, a great AD mid lane option. Katarina still performing quite well, especially within mid elo. That tends to be where she thrives, especially if you're a one trick on this champion. Higher up, you tend to be able to shut down the Katarina a bit more consistently. Lower down, most people just don't have the mechanics to play this champion. She is a very mechanically intensive pick. You want to be getting value out of your roams. You have to be comboing correctly, otherwise you lose so much value on this champion. It's just not really worth playing. Once again, like Aurelia, put the games in and you should be good to go. Moving on, so Nico also going to be within the A tier. She's actually falling towards the bottom of the A tier. She's definitely more of an elite pro-skewed pick. Her early game value with her large AoE Qs with like Scorch and Airy or Scorch and Comet can be quite impressive. Within low, you don't tend to see, like mid to low, you don't tend to see people as consistently find the flank angles with her ultimate. It is a very valuable tool. Her camouflage isn't anywhere near as utilized well enough, and yeah, she kind of sinks towards the bottom of A tier for this reason. Still a solid option and a great like pick later on, like if you are like going Masters Plus, but for the moment, gonna be within the lower A tier. Brand, actually, I'm not going to put Brand in the A tier. I'll put Brand in the S tier. Silas. So Silas is going to be staying within the A tier. He got buffed this patch for the jungle. It's definitely given him a lot more value as a flex option. It is no longer troll to pick this champion in the jungle, but as a mid lane pick, I'd still not as aggressively as top lane, where you have to only play this champion as a counter pick. He functions a bit better within mid. You're not so reliant on being a counter pick answer, but like, you do need the ult value. You do want to be playing this champion with good ults within the game. I'd recommend things like the electrocute and just playing really aggressively. He does a huge amount of damage if you're able to consistently land its combos. The Q, the E do lots of damage. His W is a nice point and click. Good sustain. Your health is kind of your resource for the most part, so do be aware of that. But yeah, Trump's in a solid spot. Good A tier pick. Tristana, also a solid A tier pick at the moment. A good safe AD ranged option. Decent scaling, decent early. You have rune choices in the fleet, the Halo Blades, and the Fleet, Halo Blades, Lethal Tempo. All these are solid options depending on what you're playing, what like sort of game you're playing. However, you're able to take extended trades. Lethal Tempo is good in that space. Halo Blades, great for burst. Fleet is a good safe rune page. She has solid options, a good AD pick within the mid lane at the moment. And Echo is going to wrap up the A tier. He is doing decently at the moment. Actually, I'll put both Echo and Galio here. So Galio is what I'd really recommend playing at the moment. Put the time into Galio. This pick is really fun to play. Well, I really enjoy playing the pick. Yeah, I would recommend playing Galio, especially with Chevalier. This pick has so much value in being able to like affect both side lanes. He has great Drake and Drake Rift and Grub fighting. He can invade quite nicely. He's good wave clear. The movement speed buff was really nice for him because it allows him to more consistently roam to sides and be less punishable, like maybe if he has to drop a wave and things. You can run Ghost Flash. You can run Flash Ghost, you can run Ghost TP, but like Flash Ghost I would recommend more if you are running like Nimbus, for example, so you can utilize both your combat summoners, and then you can run things like Celerity, Transcendence. You are always running the Aftershock for the most part. I wouldn't really recommend the Electrocute, but yeah, pick's in a great spot at the moment. Definitely recommend him. In Echo's case, he's really solid on the itemization at the moment. Works really nicely with Lich Bane. You're playing like the aggressive Halo Blade, Scorch, Lich Bane, Echo. You're really spiking hard on one item. It can be really oppressive to play against this champion when he's ahead. You don't want to fall behind. That is the main thing with this pick. If you fall behind, it can be very hard to like find your footing back into the game. But yeah, Echo, great champion at the moment. A great A tier pick. Moving on to the S tier. So Swain, once again, still the great, probably the best like frontline absorbing mage at the moment. He is just so oppressive in how like much damage he can output with items like Malignance, Leandry. Just his AoE and his dot is so strong at the moment. And he is great at putting his body on the line, as like he can like absorb so much damage. His sustain is really good if you're able to consistently drain off multiple targets. His main weakness, of course, is the fact that Zhonya's tends to be like a third, fourth slot item, and you really do value this item for your like durability. If you fall behind and you're not able to get Zhonya's, then this pick can be quite punishing to play. But yeah, great on Zhonya's spike. I really recommend playing Swain with like Flash Ghost. Ghost is for some of the spell you need to really like stick with people and like utilize Rylai's slow. Yeah, great pick at the moment. Akshan also doing okay. Akshan is a weird one. Akshan is definitely elite skewed in his current state, and like I'd honestly almost recommend Tristana over Akshan, but Akshan is still in a very strong spot. Like the crit build performs really nicely. You're not going down like the on hit route as much anymore. It just doesn't have the same level of performance. But yeah, you really value IE, you really value character for like your snowballing throughout the game. His roams are really oppressive. If you're able to consistently play his laning phase well, he can also be really oppressive in that nature. He's being nerfed next patch, but yeah, still in this patch, he's still in a great spot. Great S tier pick at the moment. Neferi also going to be in the S tier. Her simplicity and her scaling really give her so much strength here. She's really good on the lethality build. You don't really have much other options. Profane, I believe, tends to be her best first slot. Might be wrong. That might be worth checking actually. But yeah, Neferi, I'm actually going to check it myself right now. Because when I built, yeah, okay, Eclipse into Profane. That is what you want to be going. I knew I'd missed an item there. But yeah, Eclipse, Profane, and then you can go down like the lethality route. You can pick up a Hubris if you're snowballing. You can pick up an Edge if you need something a bit more safe. Stravoda's Grudge is a great item if you're able, or like if you have a lot of lethality to really scale that armor pen. You can sometimes go Cleaver into very heavy tanky comps where you're being a bit more supportive for your team, and you're not maybe like a solo carry pick. pick. But yeah, Neferi in a great spot, solid S tier pick at the moment. Nasus, I took off, but I'm going to add back on. Nasus is underplayed within mid. Should be played more. Nasus is a great mid laner, probably a better mid laner than a top laner at the moment. There are so many strengths to this champion. I've seen people just run Lethal Tempo and Hard, or like, was it Lethal Tempo Conqueror? One of the best Nasuses in EU West runs a Keystone, which he doesn't even activate that much, which is like so surprising. But yeah, like if you're running things like Fleet, you're so safe, you can scale so well, you can actually like really heavily affect both Void Grubs and Drake when you hit level 6, because you're already a oppressive fighter in that space. And yeah, Nasus, great pick at the moment. I really recommend him as a mid laner. Still functions really well as a top laner. Like I'm pretty sure I put him in S tier for the top lane. But yeah, Nasus, great S tier mid at the moment. Diana also going to move in the S tier. Diana got attack speed ratio buffed not too long ago, and it's definitely helped her a lot. Not as much within mid lane, more within jungle, but still within mid lane, she was definitely performing quite well before this. She's still performing well now. Seen a bit of pro play. Didn't do particularly well, but they had at least the idea of playing this champion, as she's in a very strong spot for solo queue at the moment. You're looking at either phase rush or electrocute if you need to be a bit more safe. Phase rush is a great option here. If you want something with a bit more heavy damage output, and then like Scorch, electrocute, like power for you early, she's an incredibly early game skewed champion. Like she doesn't scale very well unless you like are able to really heavily snowball items, but then you still want to be closing out games by like 25-30 minutes. Otherwise, yeah, she will fall off. Yeah, Diana, great pick at the moment, a great S tier option. Annie, also going to be in the S tier. Her simplicity, her items are both really strong merits for her. Her summon is really powerful. Tibbers with Malignance is really oppressive. Leandries also works really nicely on this champion. And yeah, she is a great S tier option. Cassiopeia, also performing really well in the S tier. Great scaling, not needing boots is also really valuable on this pick. You can go things like Archangels, Roa, and then just like power through other items, like whether you want to be more damage. Rabadon's a great option. Movement speed, it's like if you want movement speed, Cosmic is great in this space as well. And yeah, her power is her kiting, being really safe within like laning phase, and then being able to scale really nicely throughout the game. Has great 1v2 or 1v3 potential later on as well. And yeah, great S tier option. Talia, also going to be my S tier, is probably one of the premier pro elite picks at the moment. Within low elo, she doesn't find as much success, but like even with not finding as much success, she's still an S tier option at the moment. She's great within mid, great within mid elo, great within mid low elo, great as a mid option, great as a jungle option. She's being nerfed next patch, but not enough that I'd start not recommending her. She has so much value into like heavy mobility comps where you can really get a lot of value out of your E. Her W is a great not disarm tool. I've lost the word. Yeah, I don't know. Her W is a great ability for just disruption. There we go. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, her W is a really valuable disruption tool. Her ult gives her great roam options onto both sides. Her Q gives her so much wave clear. And that's just a lot of value to this pick at the moment. A great S tier option. And Nivea also going to be my S tier. Once again, really nice on Archangels, Roa, Malignance, Rabadon. Can work quite nicely on Leandry as well into like heavy tankier comps. And yeah, lots of value to playing Anivia. She is a bit more early game skewed than what a lot of people give her credit for. So do respect this champion if you are playing against it. She still can function quite nicely late game as like a control mage, and just like being able to utilize her wall and her storm to kind of like manipulate how fights function out. But yeah, there's lots of merits to this pick at the moment. Brand actually going to move back up to the S tier. So he got nerfed. His ultimate got nerfed not too many patches ago, and I dropped him down, but it wasn't enough. He is still an incredibly oppressive low elo pick. He's probably the best mid laner within low elo. Within mid, does tend to fall off a bit more, and then high, it's nowhere near as oppressive. But yeah, he's going back to the S tier. He's still a great option, a great S tier mid lane pick. And then we're left with 4. So, Kassadin and Veigar are great scaling picks at the moment. Veigar isn't, Kassadin isn't performing as well as Veigar, but he still has so much scaling, and like his mobility, his items, like the Roa, the Malignance, the Rabadons, the Archangels, all these items work so well on him at the moment. There's lots of power to this pick, but he can be answered by a couple more things. Veigar still can be answered by the likes of Katarina and like heavy mobility assassins. But Veigar has so many options in his build. Like, you can go more tankier options, like Deadmans for Shurelias, stuff like this. He can also just go very heavy AP into comps where he is able to play. Really aggressive because he's still safe whilst aggressive. And yeah, this champion has got buffed twice, I believe, this season, and it's put him in a great spot. Definitely something I'd recommend at the moment. And then the S plus tier. Aso and Ari quite comfortably here. Aso, of course, a great mage at the moment. His damage output, his wave clear, his ability to scale throughout the game. His E is such an impressive ability. His ult has so much AoE to it and can just like turn complete team fights around. Yeah, there's just so much value to this pick at the moment that he like deserves this S plus spot. And in Ari's case, still spikes really nicely off Lichbane, Malignance, Leandry. If you're going down like an anti-tank route, if you're just going pure damage, Rabadons, Zonya, Banshee, Crypt Bloom, stuff like this can all work quite nicely on this pick. She's probably just the best generalistic pick at the moment, but if you want something a bit better low elo, mid elo, and honestly still great within high elo, we still do see pro play Asol. Yeah, Asol can work quite nicely in this space. Definitely these two is like your premier mid laners at the moment. Ari, bit more safe than Asol, a bit more generalistic. But Veigar, also very close to these two picks. However, these two picks are definitely going to hold their spot within the S plus tier. I believe these two are being nerfed next patch. Castellan is also being nerfed, but Veigar will be untouched. So if you want to put the games in early now, Veigar, great option. But yeah, those are my thoughts on the mid tier list. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.